for a lot of 2025, compounded medications were sort of flying off the shelves. But as we get into 2026, I feel really good about it because we've got oral medications that are starting at $150 a month. Think back this time last year, if you wanted to start with Wegovy or Zepbound, it was 10x that. Maybe it was $1,000 just cash price if you got lucky and had a savings card. The market has actually spoken here. Like there's been real price competition, real price pressure, and this is becoming way more affordable than it was even a year ago.
Try to fix the current system or reimagine something new? Will healthcare ever serve consumers just like me and you? The power's in our hands, but every side's gotta come together. We want the newer generations to get something better. Until we flip the script and talk about what gets prevented. Until we see the change is permanent as if we meant it. Until healthcare is finally consumer-centered. We've got a lot to rap about.
Welcome back to the leading podcast about consumer-centered health. This is more than a show. This is a mission, y'all. As healthcare leaders, we're here to share with you the latest consumer-centered ways that healthcare is being designed, marketed, and delivered. And as consumers yourselves, we want you to understand how these options work and why they might be right for you and your loved ones. Here's what's going down today. First up, we have the Flava of the week about the Health at Home waiver being extended for 5 more years. Now that these programs have the certainty they've been fighting for, how can we advocate for the innovations that they've been asking for all along? I'll talk about that. Then Dr. Michael Botta, president and co-founder of Sesame, shares details of their newly announced partnership to offer the Wegovy pill, their continued relationship with Costco, how their clinicians approach patients who are loading their medical records to ChatGPT, and more insights from the quickly evolving cash pay side of healthcare. I'm Jared Johnson. Let's get it.
Flava of the week.
The uncertainty is over for telehealth and hospital at home programs. On February 3rd, the acute hospital care at home waiver was extended for 5 years as part of a recent federal budget deal. President Trump signed the bill, which also provides a 2-year extension for Medicare telehealth flexibilities. This didn't happen by accident. So many people have fought for this milestone. An army of sponsors, advocates, and clinicians have had to start and stop for years, caught in the purgatory of every looming government shutdown. Now they can finally stop gripping and accelerate their innovating. As a result of the bill, the waiver is extended until September 30th, 2030, providing a long-term solution rather than short-term extensions. To utilize it, hospitals must provide 24/7 care, including at least daily in-person visits by nurses or paramedics, and adhere to strict patient safety protocols. Google reports that as of late 2025, over 400 hospitals in 39 states were approved to operate and fit these criteria. What's the consumer lens? I first became aware of the innovation happening in health at home programs, as well as the consequences of uncertain reimbursement, when I interviewed Chris McGee 3 years ago. Chris founded Current Health, the health at home platform that Best Buy acquired and then years later divested back to him. Speaking with Chris surfaced a key consumer insight that I've repeated ever since then. Most people would prefer to be treated at home than stay in a hospital. Hospitals can be scary and unfamiliar. Home is comfortable. And when you think about it, what's more consumer-centered than receiving care without having to leave familiar surroundings? Now, the growth that's happened to this point is remarkable, but we're entering a new era. 400 hospitals is a good start, but considering that there are more than 6,000 hospitals in the country, you're talking about only 6% that even have an accredited program yet. And not all programs are created equal or have the administrative or clinical support needed to provide sufficient levels of care. So innovators, take note. Now's the time to move forward with health at home initiatives. The rug isn't getting pulled out from under you anymore, at least through the end of the decade. I'd expect to see a quick ramp up from players that have been placing their bets in this space for years, waiting for this day to come. And now that it is here, I'm eager to see how quickly the industry can scale up, expand out, and move forward with all those plans that they've had to keep on ice for what feels like an eternity. Let's not stop here. Let's advocate for accelerated innovation in the health at home space so the waiver extension can be well worth the wait. That's another way that we'll build the healthcare of tomorrow, and that's the Flava of the week. Hey, I'm here with my friend Carol Flagg from Healthcare Now Radio. Carol, you and I have an exciting new partnership that we want to tell people about.
Yep, we'll actually be launching an exclusive new opportunity called Limited Series. And these series will air nationally on Healthcare Now Radio, which, by the way, was named once again as one of the top 10 healthcare shows again in 2025, as well as here on the Healthcare Now Wrap. These series are going to cover some of the biggest topics in 2026, starting with rural health and including the CMS health tech ecosystem, GLP-1s, wearables, and more. So we're really excited about these series because there's a lot to talk about with these topics, which means they are ideal opportunities to create thought leaders in these spaces.
Yeah, Carol, that's what I'm the most excited about, is to really generate more informed, trusted information on these topics. And for those who are interested, spots are extremely limited for Q2 through Q4 of 2026. To get started, just reach out to either of us on LinkedIn, and we look forward to hearing from you. All right, everyone, let's get into the flow. Always happy to have a return guest and always happy to have my co-host back. Zane, how have things been? It's 2026. That's wild.
I know we made it to the new year. It's been freezing in Detroit, but at least the sun is out. There's some snow. We made it through that snowstorm that went through, last week? I'm sure when this show would air. But yeah, excited to have Michael back in this Sesame team. I know we've been starting to revisit some of the leaders that we've had a conversation with. And so it'll be cool to catch up with everyone, see where they're at and what new things are working on. It feels like it's harder and harder to keep track what all these disruptors and new entrants in health are doing and how they're bringing value to consumers. So I'm excited to hear from him.
Yeah, we're going to key in on that last part, the value to consumers. And with that, I'll welcome our guest, Dr. Michael Botta. Michael was on with us about a year and a half ago. And at that time, the partnership between Sesame, and he's the president and co-founder of Sesame. At that time, Sesame had recently announced their initial partnership with Costco, is my recollection, on some GLP-1 affordable offerings. I definitely want to ask a little bit more about affordability today. And I want to ask about the latest announcement about a partnership that caught our attention. And we said, we've got to have you back on. So Michael, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Give us a real quick recap of who you are and what you do, and then we'll dive right into that announcement I was just talking about.
Perfect. So I'm the co-founder at Sesame, and Sesame is a company we started in 2017, which operates as a two-sided health services marketplace. What I mean by that is on the patient side, we are a search and discovery platform where patients can come in and compare between thousands of clinicians across the country who are available in 40 different specialties, essentially 24/7 for various care needs. So if you're a patient, there's a large cardiometabolic vertical, diabetes care, mental health, cardiology, dermatology, primary care, urgent care, sort of you name it across primary and specialty care at actual prices. So clinicians are listing prices, times, availability. You can use Sesame sort of like you would use Expedia to find a doctor instead of finding a hotel. And then on the provider side, we provide the infrastructure for thousands of providers to run their own businesses. For most of them, this is something they do part-time. So, 2 days a week-ish, they're seeing patients on Sesame. The remainder of their week, they're working at a health system, at a hospital system, at a facility, you name it. But for those clinicians, we're Shopify. Like we're helping them run an independent business. And I've been doing that since 2017. Have continued to scale the business year over year, continuing to grow it in terms of the number of clinicians that use it, the number of patients that make a purchase every year. About 1 million patients purchased care in some form on Sesame last year. And many of those patients, not the majority, but many of them come to get support on cardiometabolic issues, whether it's losing weight, whether it's diabetes care. But for most, it's folks coming in saying, I've heard about these GLP-1s. I'm really curious to figure out if they work for me. And so what we're doing with Novo Nordisk is a big part of that.
Perfect segue. Wow, listen to that. So way to tee this up for us. So the announcement you're referring to, I believe this was January 22nd. So just recently, Sesame announced a launch of the Wegovy pill through a collaboration with Novo Nordisk. So let's dive into that. Tell us kind of what, who, what, when, where on that announcement.
I think 2026 is going to be an absolutely massive year for medically assisted weight loss, to use sort of the official term for it. But for GLP-1 supported care, for weight loss in general. 2 huge launches coming up this year. The first is Wegovy pill, which is the new oral version, Wegovy, so Novo Nordisk's semaglutide, which launched at the very beginning of this year. And Sesame has announced a partnership with Novo, where Sesame is a recognized, I'll use their exact term. So they're a NovoCare recognized care provider. Our platform and all of the thousands of clinicians on Sesame are available to book same day, same hour. If you, let's say, see an ad for Wegovy, whether that's on TV, on the radio, you show up at wegovy.com, and you say, I want to start on this medication, well, you can get pointed straight over to see a doctor on Sesame to do that and get started. We're connected to the NovaCare pharmacy, so we can help if a clinician on Sesame decides that Wegovy pill makes sense for a patient, they can prescribe it for mail order delivery from NovaCare so that a patient can get that discounted pricing that Novo is offering, which is $149 a month to start. There's more to come here. I'll point out a couple things, which are clinicians can prescribe anywhere. So they can prescribe to your local CVS, they can prescribe to your local Walgreens, like whatever makes sense for the patient. We've had a long-standing partnership with Costco. We do a lot with those guys and a great relationship with them. Costco also has a partnership with Novo. And one of the things they do is they make it a lot easier to get that discounted price if you show up at the Costco pharmacy. So as opposed to having to go online and get a prescription savings cards, one of those things where you have to confirm your address and phone number and sign up for marketing and then get a card that you physically bring with you to a CVS or a Walgreens or what have you. You can just show up to Costco and they have that cash price available for you. Whatever the best cash price is, whatever the discount is, you can just get it at the register at Costco. So we're excited to be working with both of these companies. And they're not the only folks we work with. I mentioned it's one of 2 big launches this year. There's more to come. So Eli Lilly has orforglipron coming at some point in the next few months, which is another oral weight loss drug and another great option for patients. So I expect we'll have more to talk about there as we get later in the year and as that drug comes to market. But our thinking has been, look, there are a bunch of companies that made their money selling compounded weight loss drugs. And that's sort of morally fraught in a few different ways. So one being, look, once the shortage was over, you had all these companies saying, look, we don't care. Like, we're still going to just sell you copies of these drugs. And I love affordability. I think affordability is the most important thing out there when it comes to healthcare. But I also care about like there being an incentive to develop drugs like these in the first place. So the fact that it was just sort of stealing the intellectual property of Lilly, Novo, those other companies, there's some real issues there. We decided, look, when the shortage is over, we're going to stick with like what we think is the right way to do this, which is let's make sure that we can navigate patients to the actual branded medication. These are patented medications. Like we'll work through those channels. And look, for a lot of 2025, I would say that might not be the smartest business decision because compounded medications were sort of flying off the shelves. But as we get into 2026, I feel really good about it because we've got oral medications that are starting at $150 a month. Think back this time last year, if you wanted to start with Wegovy or Zepbound, it was 10x that. Maybe it was $1,000 just cash price if you got lucky and had a savings card. The market has actually spoken here. Like there's been real price competition, real price pressure, and this is becoming way more affordable than it was even a year ago, which I think is a really good thing. And I think affordability really matters in healthcare. So we think of Sesame as a place where if you come in our front door, if you go to sesamecare.com, you will be able to find the best cash price on care that you need. We'll help you figure out, look, should you pay for this with cash? Should you pay for it using your insurance? You name it. But that's our vision of the year. It's to be the place where you can get the most affordable options for GLP-1 meds, whether you're doing that for mail order, for local pickup, and obviously for the rest of healthcare, as I mentioned, but certainly with GLP-1s, it's a huge focus.
Things like this don't happen that often in healthcare where something that transformative is literally now like that much of a fraction of the cost before. So I imagine affordability is one of the main insights that leads to this type of offering being out there now. What were some of the other insights about how consumers are either addressing that medically assisted weight loss, their metabolic health, or other things about their health and wellness? Like what other insights kind of led you to say, yeah, this is the path worth pursuing for us? Like this makes sense. We want to help people in this way.
Weight loss consumers that we see are like incredibly knowledgeable. We see thousands of people a day who have, it's weird to use a phrase like do your own research because of like all the things that means now, but people are doing their own research when it comes to weight loss. Like I see people who have read a ton, like they've read the original journal articles. They are listening to podcasts about like literal medication pricing. Like, who knew those even existed? But people are listening to them. And so when patients come to Sesame, they often know like what competitive pricing is out there. They know what the different medications in the classes are. They know how much they cost in different channels. They maybe have thought about compounded drugs and either decided against them or they tried them for a while and are thinking about switching. They're just sort of shockingly up to date, like up to the moment on what these drugs cost and where you can get them. That's been a huge factor. Like the fact that we now spend so much time making sure that our clinicians are incredibly well educated because they have to be, even just to keep up with the patients that they're seeing.
Mike, do you think that like LLMs, like ChatGPT for Health and things like that are contributing to this? Do you think that's how consumers are arming themselves with more information?
It's certainly a huge part of it. Like every day we see people coming to us saying, hey, I uploaded my last year of lab results into Gemini or Claude or GPT. And it says that I should get another like cholesterol test. Can you prescribe a cholesterol test for me so I can go to Quest and get it done? Things like that happen every day. Not for everybody, of course, but it's sort of the leading edge of what people are doing. I only expect more of it to come. I talked to some of our doctors. I was talking to our medical director yesterday about how much open evidence has become a part of her workflow and her life. So it's not just happening on sort of the patients using LLM side. LLMs are genuinely going to transform medicine on sort of both sides of the equation, certainly this year and for the future.
Would you say that the physicians you work with are open when patients show up with having done their research or using these LLM tools? Is it a positive response for them, or do they approach it with a little bit of suspicion, sort of like back in the Dr. Google days?
Yeah. So I was going to mention the same thing, which is, I think, the most important question. Dr. Google has a really bad name in healthcare. Like doctors, when they talk about like, oh, I have another patient who came in having talked to Dr. Google, like that was definitely viewed as a negative.
Sure.
For sure. There's a share and there's a segment of the clinician population that sees this stuff as a distraction or like a way to get people riled up on things that are not going to be likely. But I certainly think if you're practicing on Sesame, you're probably a little bit more tech forward than an average clinician anyway. So our clinicians are expecting it. We're trying to arm them with LLM data as well. Like in the back end here, we're plugged in with the Gemini team and the folks that we work with to make sure the clinicians are getting some of that information too. So I'd hope that our clinicians view it more positively. I certainly think that has been our expectation. Like we think, look, this should help them drill in on a more accurate diagnosis faster. If somebody is able to synthesize like a year's worth of lab results and medical history and put that in front of you in a more digestible way than 100 faxed pages from your last time in the hospital, man, that should make your life as a clinician a lot better, not a lot worse. So I think our crew is pretty positive about it so far.
It's good to hear. My perspective, obviously not being a clinician is, hey, if a patient has done their research, in my opinion, it shows they're engaged. Like that's a good thing, right? We've heard, I have a few physicians in my family who complain when patients just don't care about their health, right? And so I think at least it's a good signal that clinicians should be able to bridge off of and continue to support them in their care.
I think historically, clinicians get frustrated when patients don't care, when patients care too much. Like if a patient's going to come to you and call the office every week to be like, hey, my lab results are 4% different than they were last year, what's going on? If you're not getting paid for that as a clinician, it's tough because you get paid fee for service. The operating model is pretty tight. You don't want to be fielding questions all day from a patient who is fundamentally fine. When the model changes though, and Sesame now makes most of its revenue from patients who are in some long-term relationship with their clinician, like they're paying a monthly fee to subscribe to a practice, you name it. Well, all of a sudden, those questions, like that's part of the cost of care. Like you have the ability to message with your doctor and they don't have to worry that a phone call is going to take them away from their schedule. Like you can respond asynchronously to something. And so you can be excited about being a partner to a really motivated patient in a way that you make money and they get great care.
Love it. It's a good partnership.
Hey y'all, I'm here with Israel Crush, founder of Hyro. Israel, what's an easy to understand example of how an AI agent can help consumers in their health journeys?
A simple section would be the fact that instead of enrolling into Medicaid and proving that you're eligible once a year, you need to do it once every 6 months. Patients don't know that. So we said, you know what, we're going to get ahead of that and we're going to educate patients about some of those changes and try to get them re-enrolled or redetermine their enrollment into those programs to make sure that one, they're covered, and two, that the health system gets paid or reimbursed for those patients. So I think that's like a clear win-win where you create an AI agent that is proactively helping both patients and health systems with issues that they face and make, again, the journey a little less complicated.
Thanks, Israel. Visit hyro.ai for more information. That's hyro.ai and tell them you heard about it on Healthcare Wrap.
Curious, Mike, how are folks finding you today? Are they just doing Google searches for different conditions they have? Or like, how are you all acquiring patients, so to speak, into your marketplace?
Spending money is a big part of it, right? Like paying for customer acquisition. I certainly wish we spent less, but we spent plenty. We have the benefit of the partnership with Costco, where we've got a presence in Costco pharmacies nationwide. They're certainly a great partner for us. I think people tend to really trust Costco. So like when I talk to Costco, they usually want to make sure, hey, our job is to not screw that up, because people love Costco and we want to make sure we give them an experience that's worthy of that attention.
I don't have a membership yet. I need to get one.
Yeah. Costco, it's $59 for the year. I'll give a plug to Costco. Those guys are great. It's worth it. But we are spending on acquisition and all the usual channels. We're paying for search ads. We're paying for social. We're doing all the things that it take. And that's sort of the hardest thing about consumer health is how do people get eyeballs on you? But we've got some other things up our sleeve. We've got, it is already the month of February. So this month, a major announcement about a new program we're doing with a few different partners that I think will be a nice chance for us to go out and make the rounds and talk about what we've been up to over the last several months. We're not running a Super Bowl ad, so I cannot point to the Sesame Super Bowl ad, but we're out in the market telling our story and making sure people know what we have to offer.
I love it. If I could just add an anecdote, I think it's interesting to see how retail partnerships are forming with healthcare. Obviously, Amazon's in this space with their set of partners. Walmart just came out in the last couple of weeks with their kind of telehealth marketplace, if you will. And I remember when these retailers first started into healthcare, it was probably a different strategy, a different play. And we didn't, as healthcare institutionalists here, I think a lot of us had a lot of wonder if it would actually work. But it seems like they've pivoted and started to become a little bit more of this like marketplace play, working with folks like yourself and others to serve up great products and services to their membership.
There were a lot of write-downs from people buying expensive assets at a high price and then saying like, oh, I don't know if that was the right way to do it. And we've always been a marketplace, and Sesame operates as a marketplace to begin with. So we certainly think this makes more sense.
Michael, what else are you seeing? What other trends or other places just kind of come to mind a lot or are in the center of your radar screen, like about how consumers are approaching their health still? I mean, so yeah, we have been talking clearly a lot about that medically assisted weight loss space, but yeah, like where else are you spending time?
So affordability has been a huge theme across the board, in part because of meta pressures happening in the world, right? Like subsidies coming down on the Affordable Care Act for care, more folks who are uninsured this year than you've seen in previous years, and just deductibles being higher, people having to spend more money out of pocket for care. But there's also more discussion of the prices of care because of things like Trump RX and whether or not that website, launches as a real thing. It's still a lot of attention and a lot of press conferences and releases about how much various medications cost and why. Tons of pressure on PBMs in this space, whether it's Mark Cuban testifying, whether it's Lilly saying that they're changing their PBM for their employees. They're not the only ones. There's tons of pressure on PBMs right now and more of a move towards transparency and affordability in that space. So I think of affordability as being a huge theme for the year to come. And with there being more accessible data in healthcare, the idea that you can use an LLM privately to ingest your health insurance information and ingest your historical medical records and tell you like, hey, here's what you have to spend on care this year if you pay for it out of pocket versus if you use your insurance. A lot more real understanding than you've ever seen before from patients of what it actually should cost to see a doctor and take a medicine.
One space that may or may not be relevant here, but I'd definitely be curious if you're seeing anything here. It's like in the rural health space, especially, it seems like for sure rural health is having a moment right now in the spotlight because of federal dollars going there now. But it feels like we were kind of heading that way anyway. And I feel like any virtual options that are available now can only help those in rural spaces. I don't know if you have a take on that or a point of view on like the rural space in particular, but yeah, I'd be curious if you're seeing anything there.
A couple of things that come to mind. First, there's so much expectation around Medicare Advantage reimbursement rates getting tons of pressure on them, and they have. But something that I think went under the radar is remote patient monitoring codes. So RPM, the way that RPM is reimbursed by Medicare, it was announced as way more generous this year than I think people were expecting. So there's a lot more money available for some of the technologically assisted patient monitoring that happens in Medicare. And that's a huge move for rural health, certainly. You pair that with more practices with things like extending the telehealth flexibilities. More practices can use telehealth, make it easier for a patient who lives an hour or two outside of the big city to stay in touch with their doctor. Pair that with things like mail order delivery. It gets easier to keep up on your care if you don't live in New York City. And that's a good thing in general.
We're on the phone with a client today who was complaining some of their patients come in for like literally a 5-minute checkup visit and they had to drive 3 hours. And it's like, hey, could we have just done this through telehealth? And if I needed a script, either drone deliver it to me or pop it in the mail, right? And it's just like those things that I think the incumbents in the industry haven't really thought through yet.
Is anyone doing drone delivery? Like, that sounds like such a sci-fi thing still to me.
It's a thing. So Walmart's experimenting with it. Well, not experimenting anymore. It's mainstream now for certain consumer packaged goods. But then here in Michigan, and we had them on the show, the Zipline team, along with some of the leaders from Michigan Medicine, and they intend on piloting it here. I think it's this year. And so their service level expectation is 20 minutes after a virtual visit that, for certain types of drugs, it'll just sort of drop from the air in certain markets onto your driveway or into your back porch. And so it's definitely a thing.
Pretty cool. I look forward to that coming to New York City when somebody can drop into like an 8th floor 2-bedroom apartment. That'll be pretty sweet.
Yeah. So at the time, and I'm sure it's still the case, Zipline was pretty clear, like it's not for all markets, but for like suburban markets where there's a clear place for the droid to drop and not get stolen, it's probably going to be an option. And then retailers will probably be able to charge a premium for that level of delivery. And then Amazon's doing some of the same. So I think it's just going to be a new kind of last mile delivery standard. And then eventually healthcare will start to adopt it at some point in more and more ways.
I love to see it happen. I think about Uber and Lyft pushing into healthcare as sort of a mechanism to get people to the doctor. More easily, this is sort of a very natural extension of other delivery and last mile innovations. And for Sesame, we're totally pharmacy agnostic. So we'll connect people and direct a script to wherever it's best for the patient. So the more there are good options like these, heck, I get excited even when we can send something for Instacart pickup and a patient can get it brought over to their house. So if it's a drone, amazing. Sounds great.
It's cool to see it happen. What can you tell us about where Sesame's focusing for the next 6 to 12 months? I know some big things are in the works you kind of alluded to, but anything else about general areas where things are happening?
For us, I think this is an interesting year where we have some great partners. And it's one of the first periods, certainly in my healthcare career, where everybody is talking like in dollars. Like people are willing to say what things cost and they're willing to offer cash price discounts much more frequently. Because especially in spaces where there are existing cash markets, but even in spaces where there traditionally haven't been very clear competitive cash markets. So what we've got going on this year are more like partnerships where we are bringing clinical care on sort of the front end with our telehealth platform, pairing that with imaging labs, specialty care partners, and pharma partners that are coming to the table and saying like, we'll have actual discounted prices for care that go along with discounted prices for the medications. So being able to do that in sort of a full vertical program, we've got more of those coming, and there are a bunch that we're really excited about. The other big thing, we talked a little bit about AI, but being able to aggregate information, organize it, and put it in front of both a patient and a doctor faster has been incredible. So all of those things are working together right now for what we're doing in 2026.
Where would you say, Mike, you're kind of placing your bets in healthcare moving forward, whether it's Sesame or whatever? Like, where do you think things are really going to grow as this industry and consumer-centered health continues?
Certainly, like, what do you do for patients who have access to more information and accurate information than they've ever had before? So, and I'll nerd out for a second because I'm a recovering PhD, but historically, health economics talks a lot about the principal agent problem, the idea that just like when you go to a car mechanic, I don't know anything about my car, so I really have to trust what the mechanic says to me, like my car needs. Same is true for most people when it comes to your health. Like the doctor's telling me I have this diagnosis. I'm not an expert. They're the expert. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to follow them. And so we've always said it's really hard to shop in healthcare because you don't have all the information. You have to trust this agent to act on your behalf. That's becoming much more democratized. People have access to much more accurate information for much less cost, whether it's through specialized LLMs like Open Evidence, which lets you use it as a patient a few times a month, or hell, whether you're using ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, they're pretty darn good. And so all of a sudden, the playing field is a little bit more level. Patients are coming in with more information, more accurate hunches about what's going on, and more of an informed expectation around how something should be diagnosed and cared for. So I think we're trying to steer in that direction. Like, what do you do for patients that do know more? How do you help them get care that is accurate and like evidence-based and has a real affordable price associated with it? That's sort of my thinking around the overarching theme for this year. It's patients who know more and help, if they don't know more, make sure that they're armed with the information and armed with the ways to learn more faster.
I love that. I think that could be like the topic of just like a whole brainstorming or facilitation, or even heck, a whole conference. Like, what do you do when your customer is essentially as smart as you, sorta? How does the whole game change? What would consumer experience need to look like? What service need to look like? How would you change your interfaces? I don't know. I think that could be really powerful.
Yeah.
That's where we're headed.
Yep.
It's a whole new world. And that's a wrap for this episode. But Michael, thanks for everything. Thanks for the time again. Thanks for what you're doing to make healthcare more consumer-centered, more affordable, and for your focus in this area. We look forward to having you back again soon because there's a lot more coming.
Well, thank you, guys. It was a pleasure. Looking forward to it.